All right, it's Nelson Jones with Trafficking Insights. Got about 5 minutes until stuff starts. I'm gonna give everybody a little bit of time to join, and I'm gonna get started at 7. I had originally planned to do this off of my laptop with some slides. Unfortunately, my laptop did not hold up until this time, so I'm having to do it off of my tablet. So I was hoping that, I could read everything off of the computer and I could just keep my eyes focused on the camera and whatnot. Instead, I had to prepare this with notes instead of slides. So you might see me looking down a lot, not at the camera, but it should be a good event, very engaging. And put a lot of preparation into this. So I hope that everybody gets a good education today on human trafficking and learns a lot more about how this is affecting communities, what you can do about it, ways you can be more involved. So I'm hoping everybody gets a lot of enjoyment out of this. I'm going to wait just a couple more minutes here and we are going to kick things off. And thanks to everyone that has joined this today. I really appreciate it. Everybody that's been interested in the event, everybody that's been going, everybody that shared the event in groups. I really do appreciate it. Two minutes away. Houston, Texas. What about that? I know you got a lot of human trafficking to deal with down there. I hear there's actually more brothels in Texas than there are Starbucks. Thank you for tuning into this tonight. I hope my cough doesn't interrupt things too much. Hey there, Odette. And we got one more minute and I'm going to get started. I hope both of y'all are doing great. All right, so let's begin. First, I got to give thanks where thanks are due. I want to thank the National Human Trafficking Hotline specifically for their 2019 data report. NCMEC, that's the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. Colorado Coalition Against Sexual Assault, and Craig Smith, who wrote an article on Expanded Ramblings where I got some of my stats from. Now, I'm going to start out with some general human trafficking statistics from 2019. There's been 22,326 victims and survivors identified. There's been 14,957 from sex trafficking, 4,934 from labor trafficking, 1,048 from sex and labor, and 1,747 unspecified. Now, this could be boat trafficking, it could be organ trafficking, it may be undocumented cases of trafficking. I'm not sure exactly where, what Polaris, the National Human Trafficking Hotline, meant by unspecified. There's been 4,384 traffickers identified in 2019. And there's been a steady rise in trafficking situations over the years. In 2015, there was 5,713 situations. 2016, 7,744. And it's rose steadily every year, all the way up to 2019, where 11,500 situations were identified. From December 2007 to December 2019, there's been 63,380 human trafficking situations identified. That goes to show you what a big problem this has been over the last 13 years, and that's just since then. Human trafficking is much more prominent on the East Coast than the West. And why is this so? I believe the West Coast gang culture allots for less reporting. Also, the wider spread of people in locations such as California and demand for resources makes it so fewer people are able to successfully reach the resources they need and get good access to them due to the conditions that keep people stuck in the cycle of human trafficking, such as poverty, intimidation, etc. Now, methods of reporting. Let's talk about some of those. Now, in 2019, the Human Trafficking Hotline received 48,326 reports and concerns. 30,506 of these were phone calls. This isn't all going to be a bunch of statistics, so hold your horses, everybody. There were 8,412 of those reports were text, and that's grown by over 60% since 2018. 4,508 were online reports, 2,830 were emails, and 2,070 reports were made through web chats. Now, the pattern we're seeing develop is a sharp increase in reporting through nonverbal methods, and the need for even more of these outlets is urgent. Confidentiality is a big reason we're seeing this trend. If someone is stuck in a trafficking situation, it's easier for them to report through text than vocalize the situation. When a trafficker drops their guard for a moment's notice, it can give the victim that window of opportunity to send that urgent text or email message. Now, if you need to report a trafficking situation or a concern, you can call the Human Trafficking Hotline at 1-888-373-7888. And you can also text Be Free to 233-733. So, the three biggest industries for sex trafficking: they're escort services, illicit massages, and pornography. Now, a sex worker will generally work in a combination of these three areas throughout their career. The market feeds itself. For instance, a sex worker working on the internet may respond to an advertisement requesting adult performers for a pornography video. This may lead them from escorting into pornography. A masseuse who was once legitimate may find themselves pressured by customers to begin doing happy ending style massages. This may lead a once legitimate masseuse into becoming an illicit masseuse and turning the massage parlor into a brothel. So, the market, it really feeds itself. One thing generally leads to another in that industry, and that's why I would advise anyone to not consider a career in sex work whatsoever. It's just not a good idea. It might seem like it at the time, but it's really not a good idea. So let's talk about some recruitment tactics for sex trafficking. We got an intimate partner or a marriage proposition. Now, this is the most common method by which innocent victims of sex trafficking are indoctrinated into the lifestyle. Traffickers will use romance as a lure to breed trust and conformity in their partners, then later attempt to coerce their victim into performing forced sexual acts for others. There's a term that describes this sort of trafficker: Romeo pimp. They will shower their victims with love and affection, extravagant gifts, promises of security and financial stability, among other things. Once the victim has a sense of trust with the trafficker and is dependent on them for their self esteem, the trafficker will begin exposing their true colors and forcing the victim to have sex for money or as a way to cover the bills. That's great. There was a bust to the massage parlors. That's excellent, Odette. Um, Continuing on, familial. Oftentimes, family members will traffic their own kin, and there's various ways they accomplish this. And a primary method they use is establishing guilt. If a predatory family member can use shame and ill-founded reputation, or be the only one in control of the victimized family member, they can get the victim in a state of isolation. Once the victim, left with few outlets to express themselves or make their own decisions, is fully broken down, the familiar trafficker can coerce them into performing sexual acts at the trafficker's discretion. Now, a job offer or an advertisement. This is another very popular method. Many traffickers recruit through phony job advertisements that promise good pay and enticing positions, such as modeling or house cleaning. Once the victim arrives at the location, the trafficker may take suggestive photos of them, then advertise them for sale. Posing as a benefactor. A benefactor trafficker may pose as someone who takes a vested interest in a target or their ambitions. After meeting their victim, they may make a contribution of goods or finances, then extort them over the loan, so called loan, to perform forced sexual activity to pay off the imposed debt. And false promises and fraud. Now, this is classic. We see it in every instance of trafficking, and it ties in just about all of them. Um, a pimp or a madam, promise a victim more money than what they're actually receiving from acts of forced prostitution, and then just take it right out of their pocket. Um, so there's a lot. Human trafficking, it really thrives off of fraud. They use that lure to get the victims over there and then lead them on from there. Um, so let's talk about the top 5 forms of fraud and coercion in sex trafficking. We got exploiting and encouraging substance abuse. Many pimps and madams will take advantage of a sex worker's substance abuse issues to keep them in a state of submissive compliance. If they know their victim relies on a drug of choice, they may encourage the victim's habit or use their drug of choice in front of them to tempt the victim to remain reliant on the substance and perform forced sexual activity to obtain their fix. They may also introduce the victim to drugs that lead to physical dependence, such as opiates, to lure the victim into a deeper state of addiction and dependence on the drugs and trafficker. Physical violence. This is a common form of control used by sex traffickers. If a victim can be beaten into a state of submission or codependence, the trafficker can easily keep them under control by relying on that tactic. Many victims, especially females and those with criminal records, may fear for their safety and job opportunities if they leave the trafficker. They may feel it's best to endure the violence and continue a lifestyle of forced prostitution than go into a rehabilitation center for former sex workers. Sexual abuse. A perpetrator of sex trafficking may use sexual abuse to control a victim. Some examples include genital mutilation, rape, and branding, specifically with the sexual or ownership connotations, i.e., a tattoo in reference to a gang that is participating in sex trafficking. We got intimidation or use of weapons. A trafficker will often employ the use of a weapon to hold a victim hostage and at their mercy. We know it takes a lot more courage to stand unarmed against a weapon than general violence without the use of weapons. Sometimes all it can take is the threat of a weapon by the trafficker to scare the victim into compliance, even if no physical weapon is actually present. And finally, with our forms of fraud and coercion here, we got intimacy related emotional abuse. This is a tactic often used in grooming and is likely to be carried out throughout the length of the trafficker victim relationship. As the trafficker becomes more intimate with the victim, they seek to appear as someone the victim can confide in and rely on. As the trafficked individual begins to give more and more personal information to the trafficker, the captor will use those personal details as ammunition to manipulate the victim's emotions and sense of self worth. This is seen in all kinds of unhealthy relationships. Couples argue, but in the hands of a sex trafficker, it can be used to keep the target reliant on them alone, making them feel they have no other option but to continue a lifestyle of forced prostitution. I hope everybody's enjoying things so far. I'm about to get into some vulnerabilities for sex trafficking victims. Thanks everybody for attending. Thanks everybody for staying engaged. I'm glad I got an audience here tonight, and I'm glad y'all are so active right here. Now, vulnerabilities in victims of sex trafficking. We got homelessness or financial instability. Now, those who have no shelter may need one quickly, and if the trade-off is forced sexual activity, it may seem more appealing to a naive individual than dealing with the effects of life on the streets. All right, Mickey, that's great. A lack of family support. Everyone needs help to get by in life. If one cannot receive it from their own family, they may seek that missing emotional and financial support from a trafficker. Criminal records and habits. A criminal record can cripple the financial earning power of those impacted by one, especially felons. A felon victim may believe they will never earn an honest living due to the lengths they may go through to obtain a job. Traffickers can exploit that doubt to coerce their victims into believing a lifestyle of forced sexual activity is the solution to their financial woes. Youth. Victims of trafficking are most likely to be younger. Many of those who purchase sex want youthful victims. Younger looking individuals are more likely to be targeted by the illicit sex industry because they will have greater earning capabilities as victims. Drug dependence. Addiction is a hard thing for anyone to control and overcome. If someone's addicted to drugs, they are more likely to take risks to continue their habit, such as engaging in dangerous sexual behavior such as escorting. And finally, sexual fluidity. If a victim is more open-minded to sexual experiences across many spectrums, such as fetishism, pansexuality, there's some who identify with the LGBTQ moniker, a trafficker is going to be able to market them to a much wider range of clients and sell them at luxury rates. So, next up, what makes a geographic location? Yes, older kids can traffic younger ones. They sure can. There's no age limit on trafficking, um, especially if there's a child and some familial trafficking involved. That's a harsh situation. I sympathize with anybody who has that going on. So, what makes a geographic location a hotspot for human trafficking? Well, generally, the more people you see in an area and the more activities there are to engage in, the more likely there will be human trafficking in the midst. In my home state of North Carolina, Charlotte is considered a big hub for human trafficking. So, what are some factors that tie in Charlotte, North Carolina, being a hotspot for the epidemic? There's tourism. Lots of people come, lots of people go. This makes it easier for vacationing buyers to find a victim quickly and it makes it easier for traffickers to hide their victims within the rush of metropolitan life. Nightlife, strip clubs, bars, casinos, illicit massage parlors. These are all popular locations where sex trafficking is likely to occur and where people go to find sex workers. Poverty is a huge factor, and I do believe that's the main driving force with victims. You're right about that, Odette. I mean, it's really, for a lot of people, it's all about putting money in their pocket, but, you know, it's not worth the risk. Highways and interstates. The more roads and methods of travel, the easier it is for traffickers to get to another location. It also makes it easier for more clients to come in. More roadways means more people, more places to hide, more potential buyers, and a better economy for the illicit sex trade. So, some businesses and venues that are susceptible to human trafficking. We've already talked about mass amount of people that really plays into it. Tourism that really plays into it. So here's just a few places where you should really be on guard for instances of human trafficking. Walmarts, they're bustling. People go in and out of Walmarts all day long. People have disappeared at Walmarts. Um, you know, any area with that mass amount of people there, you want to watch out for human trafficking. Malls, it's another very busy location. Lots of people. People come in and out. Hotels. Of course, everybody knows there's a lot of human trafficking going on in hotels. Major sporting events, tourism, fans, people get out to these sporting events, they want to party. The Super Bowl is the biggest event for human trafficking every year. Massage parlors, a lot of illicit massage parlors out there. And this has not been verified by anyone, but this was one of my fresh ideas for this seminar, and I'm confident enough to say it. Casinos. A lot of stuff goes on at casinos, especially behind the scenes, and it's that sinful gambling environment. And you can be sure, especially in a place like Nevada, human trafficking is in the midst of casinos. So let's talk about the Save Our Children movement. And I had a good way to do these statistics that I hope everybody will find interesting here. In 2019, there were over 29,000 cases of missing children. 26,390 of these were endangered runaways. Out of the 26,390 endangered runaways, 4,399 are believed to be victims of child sex trafficking. And this is a point to stress. We fear when any of our loved ones go missing, they're at risk for human trafficking. It's something that we worry about, But you can see just from these, 26,390 all the way down to 4,399. We're always thankful when Save Our Children does save children, But I do believe it's a little bit overblown in a sense, because not every missing child actually does get sex trafficked or end up in human trafficking. Of course, though, we have to worry about all our youth. Now, continuing on. We live in a time where QAnon is diverting attention from legitimate child sex trafficking cases to pizza parlor conspiracy theories. So let's think about these statistics in a fresh way to examine the real depth of the problem of child sex trafficking. In 2013, Papa John's had 4,428 locations. According to Expanded Ramblings, that's how many Papa John's there were in 2013. Now that's 29 more locations than the estimated amount of victims of child sex trafficking in 2019. You could just as easily, you know, go to a Domino's. It was as easy for a predator to find a trafficked child to have sex with as it was to order carry out from Papa John's in 2013, 1 year ago. That's how easy it was for a predator to find a trafficked child to have sex with, as it was that easy as getting a carry out from Papa John's in 2013. So that goes to show you, even though every endangered runaway may not be a victim of child sex trafficking, that goes to show you how big of a problem it actually is. Um, let's talk about some vulnerabilities for child sex trafficking victims. Now, we got broken homes and poor guardians. I'm going to elaborate on that. If a child can't feel comfortable, safe, or loved within their own home, they're much more likely to seek that support system elsewhere. A child's needs should always come first in any family. A child should be fed, clothed, taught life skills, and enjoy a close relationship with both of their natural guardians. A child who appears neglected will stick out like a sore thumb to a sex trafficker. Now, talk about some of these guardians. If a drug addiction is severe enough, a guardian may sell a child to a child sex trafficker to finance their habit or just put money in their own pocket. And isn't that sick? A child with a promiscuous guardian is more likely to be exposed to sexual activity at a young age and could end up meeting a sex trafficker who dates the guardian and takes an interest in trafficking the guardian, the minor, or both. And we got access to technology. That's a big vulnerability. Children do need positive role models, definitely. Access to technology is a big vulnerability for children. Traffickers can pose as other children, kind-hearted adults, or a love interest online. They can solicit photographs from the child and then distribute them to other adults. If a child sex trafficker can convince the child to meet in person, the child may be taken by force or groomed into a life of sex trafficking. So, need some water here. My throat's getting dry. Yeah, children need positive role models. It's hard for them to get them, especially with the parents that just let them sit there and watch television all day long and just listen to anything. It's hard for children to have positive role models. So let's talk about some ways we can save our children. How can we actually do this? You need to keep your child involved and engaged with the local community while under the appropriate supervision. No one wants their child to be abused by anyone, but isolation from the community isn't healthy for any child. Only leave your child around guardians you can trust and make sure you know them personally. Me, I don't have children. I'm thankful because if I did, I'd probably have a certain lady calling me every single night. But, um, I would not leave your child around a guardian that you don't know. If a babysitter wants access to your child, I would make sure you get to know that babysitter. You know, um, I think that's how these predators are able to strike. They, they the parents, they just immediately trust them out of their authority roles, things like that. And there you go. You got a creeper watching your child. Um, so monitor your child's phone and internet activity. That's another thing you can do. Predators lurk on every avenue of the web, from social media to online gaming. I believe it's your responsibility to keep your child safe. And here are some ways you can ensure your child's phone and internet safety. Definitely, Odette. Ensure your child is only signing up for age appropriate content. For instance, you generally have to be 18 to be registered for a dating app or service. If your child is using platforms like these, it's probably time to have a discussion with them before a predator does first. You gotta watch out for suspicious apps. There are apps, there are many apps that a child trafficker may use to target your children, and many of these are used for dating or hookups. Some examples include Plenty of Fish, Tinder, Grinder, OkCupid, Zoo SK, Badoo, Coffee Meets Bagel, Muzzmatch, Bumble, Highly, and XO. XO may be a particularly dangerous app. This Android application allows predators to play games with your children, such as Two Truths and a Lie. It sounds familiar, don't it? This is truth or dare, taken to a whole new level, all to solicit personal information from your children. So be very careful if you see this app on your child's phone and start a discussion with them immediately. Now, be wary of coded abbreviations. We all see this internet shorthand, and no one has the time to keep up with it all. So here's just a few that I'm going to educate you on. 1174, that stands for Nude Club. CD9, it has nothing to do with COVID. It means Code 9, and that stands for Parents Aren't Around. F2F, that stands for Face to Face. FYEO, for Your Eyes Only. GNOC, or GNOC, means Get Naked. I'm sorry, my neighbors are distracting me. Get Naked on Cam. IWSN means I Want Sex Now. MOOS, that stands for Members of the Opposite Sex. And MOS, that stands for Members of the Same Sex. And there's a good way to remember these two. I'll teach it to you right now. Cows reproduce only with bulls, and moss can't reproduce. So you see moose or you see moss on your child's phone, and it's capitalized. It looks like some sort of code word, as it is. You can just remember moose means members of the opposite sex, and moss means members of the same sex. A cow can only reproduce with bulls, and moss can't reproduce. No. We got MPFB, which is my personal buddy. NIFOC or NIFOC, that's a worse version of the aforementioned GNOC or NOC. Nude in front of computer. P911, that stands for Parent Alert. prawn, which is a misspelling of porn. I believe that came from the 90s leet speak trend. Um, Sorg means straight or gay. SOS, someone over shoulder. SWAK, sealed with a kiss. I'm not sure what they're sealing in digital communication, but nonetheless. TDTM, talk dirty to me. And WTPA, where the party at. So those are just a few things that you can look out for if you're reviewing your child's phone. If I had taken the time to list every single bit of internet shorthand, I'd be here all night. But I think those are just some of the more disturbing ones that you should keep an eye on. Also, it's dangerous stuff. So, about to move on from the Save Our Children topic, but before I do, I'm going to leave y'all with this. You might often hear me use the catchphrase "saving our children begins at home." If you've been following me, if you've been following my posts, you probably heard me say that a few times. And to all parents watching, you're responsible for the safety of your own children. Children are the future. Children are how life goes on. Children are the tomorrow that we may never reach. So it's up to you to keep your own child safe. It's up to you to not let your own toxic habits influence your child. It's up to you to guard your children from child traffickers and other abuses. And if you don't, who else will? While we're talking about Sarah children, Lava Life. What is Lava Life, Odette? I'm unfamiliar with that one. I guess it's a dating app. That's right. Yeah. You got to keep an eye on your children's communications and who they're contacting. Now, where was I? My notes are so jumbled here from all of the drafting. Yes, a dating site. That's what I thought it was. Okay, next up, I'm going to talk about labor trafficking. Now, I'm somebody from the life I lived, sex trafficking is more of my forte. But I did want to cover labor trafficking tonight, so you're going to hear a little bit about labor trafficking. Go through that. When I get done with the labor trafficking section, I'm going to be telling y'all about how you can support the movement to end human trafficking. I'm actually going to tell y'all how I got started and just my kind of journey in raising awareness and supporting survivors. So, labor trafficking. The three biggest industries. We got domestic work, agriculture, and traveling sales crews. Domestic work generally entails maid, butler style positions. Agriculture involves the use of trafficked individuals on farms. Traveling sales crews can be trafficked from destination to destination by the trafficker, unable to earn enough money from their duties to relocate independently and obtain a position which would give them financial independence. We see that, traveling magazine sales. I guess some people love it, but I wouldn't want to just drive around and sell magazines from hotel to hotel. Um, let's talk about the 5 forms of fraud and coercion in labor trafficking. Withholding pay or earnings. This is a common tactic a labor trafficker will employ. The trafficker will promise the victim a set rate of pay, bonus, or raise, and the victim will continue working in unfair conditions while hearing excuses for the lack of compensation, such as a decline in revenue. The goal in this scenario is to keep the victim working as long as possible under false promises and get them to work harder so that whenever the deliberately withheld profits arrive, which they don't, the naive victim will have earned them. Excessive working hours. A labor trafficker will keep a victim working as long as possible to maximize their profit. A victim may work 7 days a week with little to no time for rest. And this is ultimately going to lead to a loss of the victim's peak individual production and further abusive conditions. You can't work when you can't rest, you know? I mean, you can, but it's hard to. Smuggling related. A victim may be kidnapped from their country of origin and brought elsewhere to be used to make a profit for a criminal organization's illicit business. See that all the time. Individual sweatshop or hotel work. Yes. Um, Definitely a sweatshop. I've never actually thought of hotel work like that. Now I have seen. Um, yes. Now I know there are some individuals who really don't have any other place to go, and they'll spend their whole day cleaning a hotel just to have a bed to sleep in at the night. That's really sad. Um, so that was a great one that you raised there, Odette. You've been a great viewer and a great responder. Um, Familial. Continuing on with these forms of fraud and coercion and labor trafficking. A family may take advantage of a youthful member by encouraging them to support a family business at the cost of educational opportunities. A familial foster parent could also take advantage of their neglected kin. Vulnerability is the key factor in victim selections for traffickers. Let's not forget that. By ordering them to obtain a job or paid position in their new community to cover their living expenses. I appreciate that. Posing as a benefactor. In labor trafficking, one may pose as a benefactor to lure a gullible victim into a lifestyle of forced labor. We're all familiar with NXIVM, right? We've seen this whole story on the news lately. Most people are, some people aren't. Well, the Seagram's heiress, Claire Bronfman, was close with the cult leader Keith Raniere, and she promised a job opportunity to an illegal alien, kept the migrant hidden and working for her, and only paid the victim a fraction of the originally promised profits. So that's an example of posing as a benefactor in labor trafficking. Now I'm going to continue on with vulnerabilities for labor trafficking. The pressing need for an income. Of course, that's number one. It's like poverty and sex work. The pressing need for an income is what will drive somebody into labor trafficking. When one has an urgent need to make money as fast as possible, they are more vulnerable to accepting a position in which they will be labor trafficked. Door-to-door magazine sales and other unprofitable positions in which one moves around are one such example. Language barriers. And if one cannot understand the language in the country which their employment terms and job duties are explained, it's much easier for a labor trafficker to keep them victimized. Lack of identification. There's a lack of proper identification withholds both immigrants and natives from obtaining legitimate employment. Without proper documentation, victims are unable to obtain employment opportunities and have to seek alternative means of income in which they may be trafficked. Nobody can get a job without that social security card here in America. Nobody can get a job without a license or an ID. And, once you lose those documents, very difficult to get legitimate employment. Impossible legally, but very difficult. Below legal working age. Those who fall below the legal working age where they live are always considered to be labor trafficked in any paid position by default. A poor job market in country of origin. Many natives in third world countries may seek to leave their country of origin behind to gain a better income. Africans, for example, are often lured away from their homes with the promise of a job opportunity, seeking a brighter future. And once they arrive at the trafficking location, as I've mentioned above, their documents to work may be confiscated, so that if they leave the trafficker, they will have a difficult time obtaining them back and may be unable to secure future employment. Criminal records. A criminal record can be a vulnerability in labor trafficking as well. A felon, for instance, may feel insecure about their job opportunities and be easy prey for a trafficker to take advantage of their low self-esteem. Okay. Okay. Yes, you're absolutely right about that, Odette. That's one thing that I was putting a lot of consideration into over the years. Child brides, mail order brides, that's trafficking. Yes, and yes, it could be with labor when you consider those domestic positions. I'd actually consider it both. Like you see arranged marriages. It's a cultural thing. We can't, you got to have respect for people's cultures. But, I'm an American. I believe no marriage should be arranged. Um, okay. So it's looking like I'm right on schedule to have this be about an hour-long seminar. And that's great. I'm glad it got timed well. I'm glad we've been able to have all these good discussions. And I'm getting ready. Yes, definitely. Uh, I'm getting ready to go through the ways you can support the movement to end human trafficking. And the way I'm going to begin with that is by explaining how I got involved in the movement to end human trafficking. And naturally, it started with that traumatic event that I had during my time doing sex work. I'm not going to go into that today. I don't go into that at all with anybody other than my therapist. So, what I am going to do is talk about how you can support the movement to end human trafficking and how you can get involved and just do your part. If you're new, if you're tuning into this for the first time and you're saying, well, I like what I'm hearing about the movement to end human trafficking. I hate what I'm hearing about the stuff people have to go through. Um, you can just listen to this here, and hopefully you'll get some inspiration and you'll figure out some ways in which you can get involved. Sestra, I'm not familiar with that, and that was a good point, Amber. So, where do you begin, and what can you do to get involved? Well, this is how I got started. This is how I got started raising awareness in the movement to end human trafficking. I didn't know what to do. I'm just like anybody else. I didn't know how I could be involved, and I wasn't sure how I could make a difference. So, I've been following Project No Rest. That's a local effort that aims to save the missing. Now, back in the good old days, they used to focus on locating all kinds of people at risk of being trafficked. Now, from what I read recently, now they focus their efforts solely on juveniles. But I'd noticed the commitment that they had to finding the missing. And I thought, what better way to begin than to hold a sign advertising them? I said, it was right around the time of the 2016 election, and there's advertisements have been going up. I've been seeing lots of stuff about Project No Rest. I've been following them on Facebook. So I thought, what can I do? And I said, well, I might as well just stand out there and promote them. So I bought a marker and I bought some poster board and I made a sign promoting Project No Rest, and I got a real mixed bag of reactions that day. And some people drove by, they commended me. One person drove by, they said they would kill me if I stayed there holding that sign. An elderly gentleman drove by, he said, we wouldn't have to worry about human trafficking after the wall was built. And I really hope we don't. I got a lot of faith in it myself. Perhaps in due time, it will stop human smuggling. I hope it does. I hope it makes a big difference. That day, it ended up being one of the greatest days of my life. And that was when I knew this field was where I belonged. So I didn't quite know where to go from there. And some time passed. I decided to begin a flyer campaign to raise awareness. And it started in a little place called Newland, NC. And I began displaying the flyers in the windows of local mom and pop businesses and pubs. And I went to Marion from there, and I did the same. And afterwards, I journeyed to Asheville, and I really picked up some steam with the campaign there. And my original flyers, they were amateur at best, a hodgepodge of information that didn't go too in depth nor offer very much advice. You can still see them if you go back through my pictures. Nonetheless, I was more than happy to produce and distribute them. The trail eventually took me to Newton. I was hungry to have a bigger degree of impact, so I started making calls. And I started looking into what others were doing to end human trafficking locally. I came across an organization called My Safe Haven, and ran by one Cindy Hathcock. And I'll never forget the day we met. I spent all day in preparation. I questioned if we'd actually meet. And as it got towards the early evening hours, we finally settled on meeting at a Hardee's. And while I hadn't much planned on dining, she was settled on dinner after a grueling day, and I was more than happy to join her, indulging in a complimentary milkshake. It was sweet. We had a conversation about each other's efforts in the movement. And she spoke of being a first responder to the epidemic, beating down doors of motels to save trafficked individuals in crisis. I thought incredibly bold effort. I couldn't help but admire her passion and her fervor, and I shared one of my flyers with her, and also my plan to organize a walk against human trafficking. So I left the Hardys that day. I was stuffed with lactose, enthusiasm, and a renewed sense of optimism. I knew that through our combined efforts, we would see the footprint of human trafficking diminish within the Tar Heel State. So, next up, I was in North Wilkesboro, and I was holding down a job in the fast food industry, but I was still thirsty for more involvement. And all the fountain flavors under the sun couldn't sate the drive that was within me to help others who'd been through experiences similar to what I'd endured. I think a lot of survivors of trauma feel compelled in this same way to make lemonade from lemons and use their healing and knowledge to inspire and give back to others. So I began seeking involvement with North Wilkesboro's United Methodist Church. And I would leave voicemails, I would linger at the church. I received an answer that I could definitely be involved, but every time I went to the church, no one was there to answer the door. I ended up relocating. And a week or so after I left, I was browsing my Facebook feed, and one of my coworkers was advertised as missing from Project No Rest. And it broke my heart. It really just broke my heart. It ate me up inside. I was concerned about her well-being. And I did everything I could to bring awareness to her absence. We know, as I explained in my Save Children section of this seminar, we can't always leap to conclusions. We can't believe every youth that goes missing is susceptible to trafficking or is being trafficked, but just the thought of that happening to one of my coworkers, someone so full of potential, to ever have to live through that pain, it really hurt me. And it hurt me in a way I was never hurt before. But nonetheless, it confirmed me in my faith. I wondered when I stood on Highway 18 in Morganton with that sign promoting Project No Rest. When I passed out all those flyers, did it mean anything to anyone? Did it help anyone? And that was my confirmation. That was how I knew my efforts were not in vain. That there was a God who loved me, which was difficult to believe when I began. And that all this enthusiasm I put into ending human trafficking was not a work done in vain. So, after I left North Wilkesboro, it wasn't long after that that I seen an opportunity through an organization, Vigilante Truth, to answer a question about human trafficking and win a prize. And I submitted my answer explaining how human trafficking affects suburban communities, and I ended up being one or two winners. And I received a t-shirt and publicity from my flyer campaign, and that made me really happy. It really did. To get that true inclusion and acknowledgement. But there was a slight error in the write-up. Nonetheless, I was happy to see that my efforts in the movement to end human trafficking were being recognized and the community appreciated my efforts. So, just recently, 2019, I ended up spending a year away from the movement, and I was scared to return. I thought, did everyone forget about me? Were all my efforts now squashed? So I began to build a genuine network. With the stimulus checks on the forecast and another good income in my bank account, I felt it was the appropriate time to give back. I had a roof over my head, a bed to sleep in, food to eat, and I started to think about the needs of others who were less privileged than me and needed those beds, needed that food, and needed those resources. So I began giving donations and establishing a network, and this was honestly for two reasons. I felt extreme sympathy for those who had it worse than me, and I also wanted to build my reputation as a provider and a protector within the movement to end human trafficking. I wanted others who cared and continue to care as much as I do to know I had enough empathy to donate to the cause. So, I need some water. My voice is really going out now. So I ended up with much less finances than I had before, and I almost felt betrayed by my own generosity. But I still had enough left to finance a good goal. And that was when I decided to launch Trafficking Insights. I realized I could have my very own platform where I could give my own opinions and have my very own involvement in the movement to end human trafficking. No longer did I have to stand in the streets with a sign or go around passing out. I realized Facebook could hold a sign for me all day long. Now I'd still like to get out in the field, hold some more signs, but it's nice. It's a little bit convenient. So I had the logo designed and copyrighted, and I began creating clothing and a few other things as a means to advertise the platform offline. Again, no need to carry a sign. The sign's right on my back. And just by moving my legs and getting fresh air now, I can educate the public about the epidemic of human trafficking. Now, just recently, I had the pleasure of attending Cry Freedom Mission's annual fundraising banquet, and it was exciting to see the impact they're having within their local community and the passion that they have for restoring the lives of survivors of human trafficking. You'll hear me vouch for them all the time. It's a great place. This is an organization that's been near and dear to my heart, and it was great to see how my donations have made an impact in the lives of others. Incredibly fulfilling. Agreed, Odetta. Odette, I'm sorry. I wear glasses. Um, that's what people need. Education, it definitely is. Um, so, in summary, if tonight is your first formal introduction to the issue of human trafficking, how can you involve yourself in being a part of the solution? Raise awareness. You can hold a sign. You can attend a rally like the popular Save Our Children rallies. You can use social media as a worldwide outlet. I wouldn't give you that idea, would I? You can wear clothing that supports the movement to end human trafficking. And it's ventures like these that are going to get the attention of others and inspire them to take action to end the epidemic themselves. You can donate. Research organizations in your local area that are helping survivors of human trafficking. Give them the funds that they need to continue to house, feed, and heal survivors. You might, if you've been watching my page, you might have seen where I was doing the yard sale. That was, you can hold a yard sale, and you can sell things you got laying around that you don't want, and you can donate them. Thank you, Amber. I really appreciate that. Um, so you can do a yard sale and you can donate. Mentor. You can take an interest in the lives of survivors. You can help them by encouraging healthy growth and leading them to resources and opportunities that will continue to keep their lives in motion towards positive goals. But most important, this is really what I think is most important. If you want to be involved in the movement in human trafficking, we don't always have time. We don't always have time to make that next big move. We don't always have time to, do that seminar, whatever. I think the most important part is do something daily. Because the movement to end human trafficking is not a fad. The epidemic of modern slavery has affected the lives of 4,312 trafficked individuals in 2019 alone. That's why it's so important to make a full commitment to the cause. We can't sit idly by and watch our friends, family, loved ones, and neighbors suffer from forced sexual activity or labor. So do your part daily to make a difference in the movement to end human trafficking, and eventually we will be the generation that ends it. So, I believe that just about wraps it up here. But it's 8:02. It's about a 1 hour seminar. It's nice. Everything fit right in here. Now, does anybody got any questions before I close this off? None? Well, I want to thank everyone, and thank you, Odette, for attending. I do appreciate it. You're very welcome. I planned this event out for a long time, and I'm thankful that I had the audience listening. You're welcome, Mickey, and thank you so much for attending. Now, if you got any friends, if you got any others that you would like to share this with, it's about to be up on Facebook to share. I'm sure there might already be a share button, but the finished version is about to be here to share. And it's also going to be uploaded on the Trafficking Insights YouTube channel. So you can watch it anytime from there. I want to thank everybody. I want to thank everybody so much that's attended, everybody that's helped promote this event, everybody that's helped it be a success. Yes, I'm willing to pray. And close this out with a prayer. Father, coming to you, I just want to thank you for everyone involved in the movement to end human trafficking. Thank you for the survivors' needs being filled. Thank you for the people that will be educated by this tonight. Thank you for everything. We're supposed to be grateful, but I'm very thankful for having this opportunity, and I just pray that you would heal the victims, lead them out of captivity, get them the resources they need, look after their needs, help them realize their strength, help them overcome the scourge of human trafficking. And I pray that we would see less human trafficking. I pray that traffickers would be stopped in their tracks and victims would be freed. Real healing would take place. And I pray that you will watch over the movement to end human trafficking. Bless all those involved, Father. Bless their efforts. And restore those lives, Father. Restore those lives. Every victim of human trafficking out there hurting, Father, help them and guide them and watch over them. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen. All right. Thank y'all. So I'm going to wrap this up now. I hope everybody has a great night. I appreciate the audience. Very thankful. I'm going to end this video now. You can watch this version. You can also see it on YouTube shortly. Thank you so much.